You are listening to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our sponsor, MSP-Ignite. MSP-Ignite offers a peer group experience that is unique to managed service providers in the technology industry. If you are serious about implementing a model for success through sharing and collaboration of best practices, this is the best way to do it. Head on over to msp-ignite.com to get more information. All right, on to the show. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of MSP 1337. This week, we thought it'd be a good idea to talk about breaches and our favorite communication carriers, T-Mobile, AT&T, and maybe a little bit about the Verizon that was oh so long ago, but just to sprinkle it in there. With me this week, I've got Chad Holstead of BKS. Welcome, Chad.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Hey, so I thought it'd be a great idea to talk about it kind of in the heat of the moment, because this is all playing out last week and even into this week of all these breaches, lots of user data compromised. And what I wanted to focus on wasn't so much about the breach themselves and the terrible way in which these companies are informing those that have been victims, but more about what we can do as the MSP, taking care of our clients and saying, hey, this was in the news. We're aware of what has happened. We want you to be proactive. And so you came to mind first and foremost, knowing that you've dealt a lot with the banking space and the steps that we go through. We've talked about incident response. We've talked about tabletop exercises. So I thought I should hit Chad up and ask you, what are your thoughts on what's happening right now, and how do you go about keeping your clients sort of educated so that they're making good decisions and are at least walking around or operating with heightened awareness?
So I think I appreciate that. And I personally think that as a business owner, I don't care what you are doing, if you're selling widgets or whatever, I think you have a responsibility to your employees to educate them in some way, shape, or form. And it helps you if you educate them, because they'll help you keep your data forward. You know, we talk about in our business a lot, the first line of defense is your employees. So now
Right.
Your employees, let's say they got the T-Mobile hack, or they got their data was extracted. You know, if you're an ethical, and I stress you shouldn't really, you're not ethical if you don't do it either. But if you're teaching your employees good cybersecurity tactics, they're going to know things. And, you know, like you had brought up to me earlier when we were talking about having me on, what should we tell our employees? Well, change your passwords, freeze your credit. If you, as an MSP, have deployed a cybersecurity training tool that is sending out weekly videos, monthly videos, one of those videos at some point was going to have the conversation about that. So I think that the teaching the employees is a huge step. The biggest piece about this is, in all reality, this doesn't totally affect the business owner themselves.
Right. And I think this is the scary one. Is we talk about, like, you know, BYOD when it comes to cell phones a lot. That's very common. Like, maybe we might put, you have to use Outlook or something, and it's maybe some siloed data, but we are very, very likely to say it's your own device. And so in fairness to our employees, right, we need to be able to say, hey, I know we're all using T-Mobile, or hey, you're using AT&T, you're using T-Mobile. Maybe there's a difference in what information you're sharing to each group, because the response might be different, like what was stolen. But one of the things that I was going through as I was talking with a client about the T-Mobile one is, let's just pretend for a minute that no real data has been taken outside of maybe potential credentials for logging into your T-Mobile account. And so one of the things that obviously comes to mind is like, okay, log into your account and change the password, right? Like, pick any vendor. If there was compromise, that would be like step number one. Number two, especially when it comes to like our personal information, the thought that went through my head is, unless you're buying a house, buying a car, or refinancing either of those two things, you probably don't need to have your credit accessible. So go ahead and freeze your credit. Like, take the big three. I know there's more than three, but at least do those big three. Surprisingly, once you've set it up and got it dialed in, it's actually not that hard when you need to buy something to temporarily unfreeze it. So I would do that. And then the other big one would be if two-factor and those PIN numbers that they often have for those types of accounts is to change those and make sure 2FA has been turned on. I don't know that there's a lot that you can advise someone to do beyond that when we're getting into the specifics of the actual breach. But then it gets into what you and I have talked about many times, and that is, what's the education now that I need to provide beyond that that's really about that heightened awareness for things like, hey, I got this text message, says my package will be delivered today unless I want to read or had a hard time delivering, click here to reroute the delivery. Because I ordered something today.
Yeah.
Which probably is true for me because I'm addicted to Amazon, but so that kind of goes down this sort of, I don't want to say rabbit hole, but makes me start thinking about the things that we do and other systems that are tied less specifically to a single event with a single vendor, but more about all of the things that we do have control over, that we can put sort of those hurdles or obstacles in place for our end users to be less likely to stumble because they hit a wall instead.
So I agree. And, we had a phishing attack. It wasn't a really attack. One of my employees fell for a phishing email. And it kind of went around, and we did some triage to verify that nothing got, hacked and stuff like that. Had a roundtable discussion about, what happened and why did you fall for it? And then to teach them more, including we already do know before for our employees. So they do get it as well.
Right.
But talking to a friend of mine that sells ID theft prevention, not prevention, but monitoring.
Got it.
And when this happened, I asked my employees, I said, do any of you guys use this software? Do any of you guys credit monitor? Do any of you guys dark web monitor? We dark web monitor our own team.
Sure.
Do you guys do any of that? No, why should I? Well, because if you get hacked and your identity gets stolen and you're working for me, the average time to restore your identity takes 40 hours of business time.
And up to
40 hours of you working to get it done.
Well, and then there's the actual user, the person that's been affected, that may take much longer than that.
Yeah. So then you look at it and go, well, I can't afford to miss you for 40 plus hours.
Right.
I can't afford you to be frustrated and stressed about this. So I actually offered every one of my employees a raise if they took on identity credit monitoring. Now that's an anomaly. But the other piece of this is going back to your point about education. Yeah, I changed my T-Mobile password. But what people don't tell you is that, well, if your T-Mobile password is the same as your ComEd password, they've got your ComEd password now. And your email address is, by the way, the same. So they already have your username.
Yes. Before I want to go there here in a second, I want to continue down the path of what you started. So let's think about this. You got the McAfee Protect, you've got LifeLock. I'm not sure that I know all the potential options that are out there. Like I know with AT&T, they've got some sort of protect that you can just turn on regardless of whether or not there's been a breach. What has me floored is that we talk about automation all the time in cybersecurity, and that's essentially what this is, right? We're talking about a monitoring service to monitor my traffic and financial transactions, et cetera. What we don't spend a lot of time talking about is like, hey, when was the last time you logged into your bank account and checked for fraudulent transactions yourself? Or, bothered to verify that, when you do order something, what's the actual like the shipping address on file for your location? Does it match? Is there correspondence there? So I think that's important too, that we don't lose sight of the fact that everything we do can't just be handed off to some third-party service. And so that kind of takes me like back full circle to these vendors. If you look at the way these are being handled, and obviously right now AT&T is very different from the way T-Mobile is handling it. Neither one are doing a good job, but T-Mobile saying, "Hey, here's credit monitoring service," and AT&T is like,
"That's basically it. It
right,
happens.
so,
c'est la vie. Here's credit monitoring."
And that's all they're saying. And like we're talking about a service that they're going to give you for a year. And the reality is, with data like this, even if it got used in the first year, which could happen,
It won't.
5 years from now, when you really need the service to be monitoring, you are now paying for this on your own. It's somewhere between $35 and $75 a month to monitor, your behavior. So I feel like if we're not teaching the end users of how to be more proactive without paying for a service, making that a habit, these bad things are going to continue happening anyways.
Yeah. And the same thing as we always talk about in the MSP, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
Right.
You will be breached. You will have some type of fraud. I pray that you only have a credit card fraud and you can shut down the credit card and get a new credit card. But if they take your social security number, you have a lot more.
That's for life. I mean, you can't get a new one. Good luck.
Nope.
It's like trying to get a vaccine card. You might have to go get another vaccine, even though you already got it because you lost the card. So talk to me a little bit about sort of the pieces. Because you mentioned the offering a raise. Like these are things that you think are like no brainers, but when we look at the events and we've been talking about, cell providers because of the three that we know about that are kind of big. Verizon's a little bit further in the background, but Microsoft just had a big breach too, 38 million records exposed for everything from personal vaccination cards and patient health records to you name it, all because of poorly implemented. And then you had if you plug a Razer mouse in, you suddenly elevate during the install of drivers to admin privileges. I mean, these things are going to continue happening. They're not going to go away. And that's really not the point of what we should be focusing on, other than to say, how do you answer the client that says, hey, what are you guys doing about this? It's kind of the flip it on its head and go, well, what are you doing about it? We've got to be proactive and share to them, hey, these are the facts. This is what we know. With what information we have. These are the things that you need to do. And these are the things that we're doing for you, and keep the communication going, right? Like, I think that's the meat of where we have failed miserably, is communicating first to the client before they call us to complain or panicked or you name it about something that none of us can do anything about.
Well, the piece that we struggle with a little bit here is the Chicken Little syndrome. Okay. If I called every one of my clients every time a Target, Verizon, somebody had a breach,
you'd be on the phone a lot.
Yeah. And then they would never, I don't have any value to them at that point.
And I assume you're referring to the sky is falling Chicken Little syndrome?
Yes.
Which would be the I'm crying wolf, or any number of analogies.
Same principle.
Okay, good.
Yep,
just making
exactly.
Sure. All right.
The biggest piece of it, though, is if I call them when there is something that is of a value to them.
Sure.
So I know you had talked about, you have a customer that has all of their users on T-Mobile. Yeah, if I knew of a single customer that was that way, all day long, I'd be like, hey, are you doing anything to talk to your employees? Have you at least mentioned that to your employees, that there might be risks for them? And
I think it's being specific, right? It's being specific, not saying like, hey, there's a lot of malware out there. You guys make sure that you check stuff. No, we're calling out what you're seeing in the media. And we're saying, if nothing else, this is happening right now. You can do something about this.
Yeah. And the struggle that a business owner is like, well, what can I do? The first thing you do is open up a line of communication to your employees and say, hey, if you're on T-Mobile, you may have a risk. Do you want to talk to someone? And then, fine, Mr. Customer, engage us, because I have answers for you at that point. If they don't want to talk, that's it. But you have to engage with your employees and say, hey, have you seen this? Are you aware of this?
So a few minutes ago,
that's where our employers fall down. So.
I agree. So a few minutes ago, we were talking about, you started mentioning like, hey, this password's compromised, go change your T-Mobile password. And you're like, well, what about, your Comex or whatever it might be? Did you change that password because it was the same password? I think that this is the other piece that's making this such a big scale problem, is that we're still, as people, going, I got my 5 passwords, don't worry. I rotated
password
the
1 2 3 4, password 1 2 3 4 5.
Yeah. And some really secure ones, May 23rd, whatever. I mean, we've got some good ones, right? So I think this is getting into that other arena that we talk about a lot. And that is, it's not just about educating for the incident, it's about educating to avoid the incident, which is if you use good password hygiene, if you turn on 2FA, if you regularly check and monitor, etc., then you're not relying entirely on a tool that tried and true is still only accurate 60% of the time. So
yeah, that's 100% agreed. So
I think that's an area where we have a lot of opportunity, right? Like, and I don't want to like totally just go with vendors and have it be all about vendors, but Microsoft, LastPass, Okta, the list is a mile long of products that are out there that actually address this problem specifically. Because if we look at the recent breaches, what do they all have in common? Passwords, usernames. I mean, like we can make this not be really that relevant if that stuff's changing all the time.
Yeah, well, and this kind of goes back to the like dark web monitoring. So
yeah,
we'll go back to the MSP. As an MSP, I should be dark web monitoring my customers myself, right? And this is where, so basically,
we're now back on the internet. Sorry, your concern as I did that nice interruption of killing my internet for a minute.
My concern is that as a bit employees end up on the dark web,
yeah,
I have a reason to ask them if they are using that password anywhere else. It's something with me.
So how do you kind of fit that in? Because I think that's probably one of the most significant pieces that we can change.
So how I fit it in is I just have a conversation.
And that may be all that's really needed, right?
Your password is up there. It's hashed out. Are you still using that password?
Right.
It's as simple as that. So.
And I think that's a struggle for people, right? Like the last question is like, hey, I got this notification that says my password's been used before, or it's compromised, or now we even put it in browsers where it pops up and say, hey, this password's already been used. We're like, well, I don't use this anywhere else. It's like, well, you may not, but who else is using your password?
Yeah. I mean, my personal LinkedIn password from the LinkedIn breach, how long ago was that? 6-7 years ago?
Yep.
Constantly gets alerted. Your password is on the internet from LinkedIn. Yeah, I know. Yep. It's been there forever.
Well, and I get one from back in the day when I used my favorite service of all time. It was called MySpace. Yeah. Rocking MySpace with a compromised password. I can honestly tell you, I don't even remember ever signing up for MySpace. It's been that long. But it's out there. I think it was like 2016. I think they had a compromise. I'm like, I didn't even know that stuff existed still. So that kind of gets into another piece, like, digital footprint. You ever go back and encourage your, users and staff, like, hey, clean up. I had this example given to me a couple days ago, like Google Enterprise and Microsoft both support this, like to use aliases when you sign up for things like newsletters, so that when you're suddenly getting targeted for marketing or sales or solicitation, because
I like that idea.
You're getting an email that says like, Chris.Microsoft at whatever, right? Like now I know exactly where it came from.
Yeah, I like that idea. I'll have to start doing that. But you're right. To bring this back a little bit to the business owner and the MSP, the business owner has a, like I said, quote unquote, ethical responsibility to talk to their employees about this. And things like know before and all that kind of stuff can help educate the employees on how to be more diligent going forward, both personally and professionally.
Right.
But the way that you talk to a business owner about it is say, hey, Mr. Business Owner, if Chris's password is up on T-Mobile's hack and his social security number is up there, he's going to potentially cost you 40 plus hours while he revives his identity.
Right.
And if he's using the same password as he's using for your Microsoft 365 account, well, they just accessed your Microsoft 365 without even asking.
Well, I think that's you just nailed it on the head. It's like getting a bump, what do they call it? Bump key, where it's like, I don't need your key, but if I get one that's close and I hit it right, I've gone through the door. This is like, well, I have your password. How many doors does this open besides, say, T-Mobile?
That's exactly it. So, and all of our usernames are the same. It's our email addresses. That's the easiest thing to find out about us. It takes me 5 minutes to find out your email address. So that's what we have to talk about with our customers. Is it's not always about protecting the employee data or the corporate data, but it's protecting your employment asset. I mean, our biggest assets are our employees.
So one of the things, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, that I've been thinking about is what am I doing to help either my company or my staff or my clients with questions like, have we done anything to evaluate whether or not we should be buying cell service or laptops or whatever it might be from this vendor? Because I feel like we're in the state of culturally of saying convenience, efficiency, productivity, and cheap. Maybe not even in that order. And when you disrupt that by saying security, complexity, not available, we get angry, right? We want convenience. I want another Starbucks closer to me because the one that's only 3 blocks away, it's always busy. Get me one closer, right? Like we're spoiled. So should we get anything other than what we're currently getting when vendors have compromise and we pay them to make sure I can make a phone call and that works pretty good.
So I think had you said that to me in early 2019, the answer would say, good luck. Nobody's going to care.
Right.
Since the early 2020, I think the conversation is flipping. It's not there yet. Productivity is still number one.
Sure.
But I think security is now, if not number two, fastly rising in the charts.
This is number two. It's just sparkling.
Nice. But I think, and our customers are asking for it. But your other piece of that puzzle is, okay, I'm sure they have it, but we're going to ask this in a hypothetical. I want to evaluate T-Mobile. Do they have a SOC 2? No. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go to Verizon. Do they have a SOC 2? No. Let's go to AT&T. Do they have a SOC 2? No. Who the heck is left? Right?
So let's rewind that for a second because I think that you're onto something, but it's also problematic at the same time. So depending on where you live, dictates who has the best coverage. So depending on your business operations, how does cellular services fit into that equation, and does it matter? So I think that gets back to what we've probably talked about a million times: is okay. Now we're having a risk conversation.
That's kind of where I was going with it. At this point. And take the word T-Mobile out and put in Jane Doe's company. Okay.
Yeah.
Every customer, every business has vendors.
Right.
And those vendors have certain responsibilities. If the only vendor I can use because I'm on top of a mountaintop is T-Mobile, I have the high risk because I do not have any other options.
Yep.
But if I'm sitting down there in metropolitan city XYZ and I can get everything under the sun.
Yeah.
Well, now I do have a responsibility to verify that I'm getting the best security vendor for my product.
So this makes me think, not to go down a rabbit hole, but if you think about like GDPR, CCPA, some of these other privacy laws, it's great to have them now, but like there's still all this data out there that's already, is blessing the internet with their presence. So now, yay, I get to work with a new vendor that's bound under a GDPR law. Well, the breach happens. So what? If I get financial compensation because of what has happened, the data's still gone, right? Like, just because you paid to get it back doesn't mean it's not still out there. And I think that's the part that we're still missing is like, we got to do a lot of cleanup on information that's out there. I think the laws really need to be cracking down on what information should actually be collected, not what information can I have you delete that you've already collected.
But we can keep this rabbit hole going. If you're not going to take my social security number, what other identifier are you going to use to identify me?
Of course.
And that identifier then just becomes as valuable as social security number.
Well, what I found interesting though about I think it was the T-Mobile one, they had driver's license and social security number. Like you don't really need both because one's tied to the other in some way. So, I recently was working with Compliance Control Hub, and they were talking about the schemas that are used to look at information that's collected about us. And there's something like 27 different record types, ranging from military service to your education profile. And so many of them have different fields that they collect information on, but none of them are the same. And so one of the things that's being worked on right now is how to unify all of that so that you can reduce the number of fields used to have a complete picture which reduces that privacy impact by not having to collect so much information just to get one picture. So,
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, our challenges are less about compromise with big vendors and less about the breaches that they have, and more about how to help everybody that we work with from allowing that data to matter when someone else has their hands on it.
Yeah. And as an employer, we have a responsibility. As an MSP, we need to make sure that our customers know that we're here for questions.
Right. And I think taking that one step further is to lead with a information piece when it's blanketing the headlines, right? Like if there's an obscure like, hey, the Razor mouse now elevates privileges when drivers are being installed. So 99.99% of the people out there are like, I have no idea what was just said. And that means that someone still has to sit in front of the computer and plug the cable in and time it just right to exploit the machine. But the point is that it's there and it's possible. And so, hey, my kid has a gaming Razer mouse. That means that if he plugs that into my PC, what potential risk am I putting my company at? Because that's my computer. Like we won't even get into kids shouldn't be using my computer, but you
Yeah,
get
there's
what I'm
another
saying, right?
conversation.
There's a list of things that we need to be more proactive about, and I don't think that that's currently happening. And I would say if you've got suggestions, if you want to put these in the, when I post on LinkedIn, you got some comments like, hey, I would
No,
maybe
we'll
do
do that.
this. I think that there's an opportunity here to say, hey, as an MSP, when bad things happen, even if it's not to us, that we're proactively saying, hey, this was in the news. You should be aware of these three things because it could impact you. Here's what we're recommending that you do about it proactively. And oh, by the way, we're going to have a monthly, or this month, we're doing some sort of event online that says, hey, tune in for some tips and tricks so that you don't fall victim to the next phishing campaign, or that you're looking for, hey, this is trending post AT&T or post T-Mobile. The one I saw just recently is, hey, in light of the recent T-Mobile hack, we're click here to change your Apple iCloud password. Like that's got nothing to do with T-Mobile. So right
Yeah.
away, they literally just put two things together that have nothing in common. But how many people are going to click on it and go, I better do that?
Yep. Exactly. And now they got their Apple ID password.
Listen, Chad, I realize we had a little technical difficulty there, but I appreciate you coming on. You have anything else that you think our audience should hear before we say, peace out?
No, I think that was a really good conversation. I look forward to posting it. And if anything comes up, I will definitely comment on your post.
I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. This has been an episode of MSP 1337. Have a great week.